The transmission pulsed through the depths of space, a forgotten whisper clawing its way back into existence. Across the Orion Rift, deep space listening arrays in the Terran frontier picked up the signal. An ancient distress call, looping endlessly. Inside UNSC Outpost Helios 9, Lieutenant Darren Cole stared at the garbled transmission, his fingers trembling as he ran it through translation protocols. Words in dozens of alien tongues layered over one another, 1,000 dead voices screaming in unison. Then, as the filters stabilized, a single phrase emerged. The Forsaken Light has awakened. The final judgment is at hand. Cole swallowed hard. The words felt old, far older than any recorded civilization. He hit the emergency beacon. Within minutes, sirens blared across the station. Humanity had been a silent observer in the galaxy's conflicts for decades, but something told him that was about to change. #### Earth's final warning. On Earth, in the war room of UNSC High Command, holograms of burning colonies and war-ravaged planets flickered above a circular table. The Velderi Dominion and the Kal'Zur Ascendancy were locked in their final struggle, and every intelligence report confirmed the same thing. Neither side cared about collateral damage. The moment one of them gains the upper hand, growled Fleet Admiral Tobias Grayson, the rest of us burn. For centuries, humanity had avoided taking sides. They had neither the fleets nor the political clout to dictate galactic affairs. But if the Dominion or the Ascendancy won this war, Earth would be next. The only thing keeping humanity safe was the fragile balance of terror between the superpowers. And now, something had changed. "We intercepted an ancient distress call," said Dr. Elias Voss, the head of xenolinguistics, originating from Alaris AX. The name sent a ripple of unease through the room. Alaris AX was a dead world, one of the last confirmed strongholds of the precursor race, an enigmatic species that had vanished long before humanity ever reached the stars. Every scavenger, warlord, and megacorporation had scored its ruins for centuries, yet none had returned with anything of real value. But now, the call had returned. "We believe it's linked to an artifact known as the Forsaken Light, a mythical failsafe that, if real, could rewrite the balance of power." Silence. Speculation, Admiral Grayson said flatly. Voss's lips curled into a smirk. "That's what we thought too. Until the Ascendancy and Dominion fleets started mobilizing toward Alaris AX. A hushed murmur rippled across the table. If those two empires were converging on the same target, it meant only one thing: it was real. Admiral Grayson turned to Captain Elena Rains, one of Earth's most decorated officers. "You'll lead the expedition. Find out what's on that planet. And if the Forsaken Light is real, make damn sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." Rains exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. She had no idea that humanity had just been thrown into a war it could never walk away from. The Forsaken Light had awakened, and Earth's time as an observer had just ended. The UNSC Redemption dropped out of slip space above Alaris EX, its reinforced hull trembling against the gravity well of the long-dead world. Through the bridge viewport, Captain Elena Rains saw the planet in full. Cracked continents, dried-out oceans, and the skeletal remains of cities that predated humanity's first spark of fire. "This place is a graveyard," muttered Lieutenant Jonas Hale, her tactical officer. "Graveyards don't send distress signals," Rains countered. Dr. Elias Voss leaned forward, eyes gleaming with something between awe and terror. "We're standing over the last known precursor stronghold. If we find anything intact down there, we could rewrite everything we know about galactic history." Rains wasn't so easily excited. The Velderi Dominion and the Kal'Zur Ascendancy were already en route. If they were willing to break a cold war to race here, that meant whatever was down there wasn't just historical. It was dangerous. "Deploying recon probes now," Hale announced. A dozen metallic drones shot from the Redemption's underbelly, streaking into Alaris EX's dense atmosphere. Rains watched their telemetry feed. Harsh winds, radiation spikes, massive structures still standing despite millennia of decay. Then, something interfered. One by one, the drones cut out. "No way," Hale said, shaking his head. "We lost them all." "Jamming?" Rains asked. "Or worse," Voss muttered. For a moment, silence hung over the bridge. Then a new reading flared across the screen. A power signature. Deep underground. Still active. Rains made her decision. "We're going down." The ruins below. The dropship Argus I tore through the thick, dust-filled skies, flanked by 2 escort fighters. The crew braced against the turbulence as the ancient city sprawled beneath them, alien spires twisted by time, monolithic structures shattered by long-forgotten wars. Picking up life signs, Sergeant Troy Dawson called out from the sensor station. Rains's brow furrowed. "Impossible. This world's been dead for thousands of years." Dawson shook his head. "They're faint, but they're there. Something is moving down there." The Argus I banked toward a massive chasm, where the power reading pulsed like a heartbeat. The Forsaken light was calling. As they landed, Rains led her squad out, weapons at the ready. Voss followed close behind, his eyes darting across the alien structures. The ruins hummed with an energy just beneath the surface, as if something long dormant had awoken. They moved cautiously through the crumbling halls, their boots echoing against stone not meant for human feet. Then, in the center of a vast chamber, they saw it. A monolith, pulsing with shifting light. Rains stepped closer, her breath catching. The artifact wasn't just active. It was responding to her presence. Then, the shadows moved. The Kal-Zur ascendancy had arrived. Blaster fire erupted. The fight for the Forsaken light had begun. Blaster fire rained down from the broken archways above. Kal-Zur ascendancy void reavers. Ruthless, cybernetically enhanced shock troops descended like specters of death, their sleek, black armor refracting the dim light of the ruins. Captain Alina Rains dove for cover behind a crumbling pillar as energy bolts scorched the alien stone around her. Sergeant Troy Dawson returned fire, his rifle barking in rapid bursts. "We're pinned," Dawson yelled. Dr. Elias Voss clutched his datapad, staring at the pulsating monolith in the center of the chamber. The Forsaken light was no ordinary artifact. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match his own heartbeat, as if it were aware. "Rains," he shouted over the gunfire. "This thing, it's reacting to you." Rains risked a glance at the monolith. The swirling glyphs on its surface shifted and rearranged, forming symbols that she somehow understood, not as words, but as meaning, as purpose. The light had chosen her. But the Kal-Zur didn't care. A towering reaver lunged from the shadows, swinging an energized plasma blade. Rains barely dodged, feeling the heat scorch her armor. She rolled, came up firing, and emptied 3 rounds into its helmet. The warrior collapsed in a heap, sparking and twitching. "We need to fall back to the dropship," Dawson called, lobbing a grenade toward an advancing squad. The explosion sent alien bodies tumbling. "No," Voss said. His voice was different now, resolute, almost reverent. "We leave now, and they take it." Rains gritted her teeth. He was right. If the Ascendancy seized the Forsaken light, they'd use it as a doomsday weapon. Earth would never stand a chance. More reavers closed in. They were outnumbered, outgunned. No way out. Then the light surged. A blinding energy wave erupted from the monolith, expanding outward in a shockwave that sent the reavers flying. The walls trembled, ancient circuits flaring to life across the chamber. Rains felt something pulling at her mind, dragging her into a vision. The vision. She stood in a world not of her own. Towering beings, their features obscured by radiant armor, stood in a grand hall. She couldn't understand their words, but she felt their emotions. Desperation. Resolve. The vision shifted, cities burning, entire star systems falling to darkness, species wiped from existence by forces too vast to comprehend. The beings tried to hold the line, to stop the tide, but they failed. Then the last of them approached something familiar, the Forsaken Light. They sealed it away, inscribing a final decree into its core. Only those who refuse to kneel shall wield the light. The vision snapped back. Rains gasped, reality slamming into her like a tidal wave. The light had chosen her, and now the entire galaxy would come to kill her for it. We need to go. Now. The chamber trembled as the Forsaken Light's energy rippled outward, its pulse sensing with Captain Alina Rain's heartbeat. She stumbled back, gripping her rifle as the last echoes of the vision faded. The Kal-Zur Void Reavers lay sprawled across the floor, either unconscious or writhing in pain. Whatever the monolith had done, it had crippled them, but not for long. Sergeant Dawson grabbed Rains by the arm. "Captain, we need to get the hell out of here." Dr. Elias Voss was still staring at the monolith in stunned silence. "It bonded with you," he murmured. "You're connected to it now." "Yeah. Well, tell it to get us off this rock," Dawson growled, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Rains forced herself to move. Her mind still buzzed with the knowledge imprinted by the Forsaken Light, but she had no time to process it. More Kal-Zur forces would be coming, and fast. "Argus 1, do you copy?" She called into her comm. "Static." Then, Dan Ascendancy gunships, under heavy fire. Rain's stomach tightened. They weren't just being hunted inside the ruins. The Kal-Zur were already attacking their dropship. We need to move. Now. The dead city awakens. The team sprinted through the ruins, navigating twisting corridors and collapsed walkways. Strange glyphs flickered to life along the walls as Rains passed, like the city itself recognized her. "Whatever this place is," Voss panted, "it's waking up." They burst into the open, emerging onto a massive crumbling bridge suspended over a vast abyss. Across the bridge, Kal-Zur reinforcements, dozens of heavily armed warriors, were already moving in. "Cut off," Dawson snarled. "We'll have to fight our way through." Rains gritted her teeth, raising her weapon, then froze. The air hummed. A deep metallic groan echoed from the abyss below. The ground rumbled, sending dust and debris tumbling into the chasm. Then something moved beneath them. Massive, mechanized structures, long-buried towers and platforms, began rising from the depths, shifting like colossal gears in an ancient machine. Rains felt it. The Forsaken Light had activated something far bigger than just itself. The Kal-Zur soldiers hesitated. Even their brutal instincts were overpowered by fear. And then, boom! A Dominion warship tore through the clouds, energy lances firing down at the Kal-Zur position. Veldari Dominion forces had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. "Son of a bitch," Dawson muttered. "We're in the middle of a damn war zone." Rains exhaled sharply. She had to make a choice. They could fight, or they could run. The light pulsed within her. It knew the answer before she did. Survive. Escape. Fulfill the mission. She turned to her team. "We make for the dropship. No stopping. No looking back." And then they ran. The ruins shook as the first Dominion bombardments struck the surface. Explosions rippled across the dead city, sending chunks of alien stone plummeting into the abyss below. Captain Alina Rains barely kept her footing as she sprinted toward the extraction point, the Forsaken Light's pulse hammering in her skull. Behind them, Kal-Zur soldiers were already recovering, their cybernetic enhancements dampening the Forsaken Light's energy wave. Further back, Veldari Dominion troops were deploying from drop pods, their sleek black armor reflecting the fires of war. Caught between two of the galaxy's greatest superpowers, the humans were nothing but prey. "Argus 1. Status." Rains barked into her comm. More static. Then, "Under siege. We can't." A massive explosion lit the sky, and her stomach dropped. Their dropship was gone. "Damn it," Sergeant Troy Dawson cursed. "We're stranded." Rain skidded to a halt, scanning the chaos. No evac, no backup, no way off this rock. She gritted her teeth. No, there had to be a way. Then, Dr. Elias Voss gasped, pointing toward the far side of the battlefield. There, amid the chaos, a Kal'Zir interceptor lay half-buried beneath fallen rubble, its pilot slumped over the controls, dead from the earlier energy blast. Our way out, Rains realized. Are you insane? Dawson barked. We can't fly Kal'Zir ships. The Forsaken Light activated this entire damned city. Rains shot back. Something tells me it can handle a starship interface. No more arguments. They ran. A desperate escape. Blaster fire sizzled past Rain's head as she vaulted onto the Kal'Zir interceptor, pulling herself into the cockpit. The sleek organic metal controls shifted under her fingers, responding as if alive. She didn't know how to fly this thing. But the light did. A surge of information flooded her mind. Flight systems, weapons control, Kal'Zir command codes. It felt like the knowledge had always been there, buried deep, waiting for the right moment. The console lit up, responding to her touch. Strap in, she shouted. Dawson and Voss barely had time to climb aboard before the interceptor's engines roared to life. The vessel lurched upward, narrowly avoiding another Dominion artillery strike. Punch it, Dawson yelled. Rains yanked the controls. The interceptor screamed into the sky, dodging Dominion and Kal'Zir ships as they engaged in brutal aerial combat. Enemy pilots tried to lock onto them. Too late. The light guided her hands. She twisted through the battlefield, weaving between plasma bolts and missile trails. Then she slammed the throttle forward. The ship broke atmosphere, streaking into space like a comet. But just as the void swallowed them, a new presence loomed ahead. A Kal'Zir battleship, and it was waiting for them. They had escaped the planet, but the hunt was far from over. The Kal'Zir battleship loomed ahead, an obsidian dagger against the void. Its weapon arrays flared to life, locking onto the stolen interceptor before Rains could even think. No escape. No time. Hold on, she barked, yanking the controls. The interceptor rolled hard just as a plasma lance sliced through the space they had occupied a second earlier. The shockwave buffeted their ship, alarms screaming in protest. Sergeant Dawson gritted his teeth, strapping himself in. Any brilliant ideas, Captain? I'm working on it. Rains snapped, her hands moving on instinct. Or perhaps something more. The Forsaken Light pulsed in her mind, feeding her knowledge of Kal'Zir starcraft, their weaknesses, their blind spots. She suddenly knew exactly where to go. With a sharp dive, she sent the interceptor hurtling toward the battleship, not away. Are you insane? Dr. Voss yelped. Rains ignored him. She skimmed the interceptor along the battleship's armored hull, weaving through the maze of defensive turrets. Their tracking systems struggled to lock onto a target so close to their own ship. Come on, come on. Then, there, a maintenance airlock flashed past, barely visible in the shadows of the hull. Rains flipped the ship and engaged magnetic clamps, slamming them into the battleship's underbelly. The enemy fire stopped. They were invisible to its targeting systems, for now. Boarding the beast, a heartbeat of silence passed. Then Dawson exhaled sharply. That was either the craziest or smartest thing I have ever seen. Little of both, Rains admitted, already moving. But we're not safe yet. We need to take this ship. Voss paled. Take a Kal'Zir battleship. You realize they have an entire crew of elite warriors on board, right? If we stay here, they'll find us, Rains said. If we run, they'll hunt us. The only way out is through. Dawson cracked his knuckles. I like this plan. They forced open the airlock, climbing into the dimly lit corridors of the battleship's lower decks. The walls pulsed with a strange, living energy, the organic metal structure breathing like something alive. Rains gripped her rifle tight. Stay close. Stay quiet. The ship felt wrong. Not just because it was enemy territory. There was a presence here, a feeling of something watching. As they moved deeper, Voss suddenly froze. His eyes widened. "Do you hear that?" Rains strained her ears. At first, nothing. Then, a whisper, 1,000 voices speaking at once, from deeper inside the ship. Then, a low growl echoed through the corridors. Rains turned, rifle raised. Shadows shifted. Something not Kelzer was aboard this ship, and it had just noticed them. The hunt had begun. The corridor darkened. Shadows twisted along the walls, writhing unnaturally as if they were alive. Captain Alina Rains clenched her jaw, scanning the dim passage with her rifle raised. The whispers were growing louder, shifting between Kelzer dialects and something more primal. Something was here. Sergeant Dawson gripped his weapon tight. "That doesn't sound like any Kelzer I've ever fought." Dr. Elias Voss swallowed hard. "That's because it isn't." He pointed at the walls. The metal was warping, corrupting, tendrils of black energy pulsing through it. "This ship is infected." "Infected with what?" Rains asked. A deep, guttural snarl answered. A shape lunged from the darkness. A Kelzer warrior, or what had once been one, collided with Dawson, knocking him to the ground. The creature's body was twisted, its obsidian armor fused with some kind of parasitic growth. Its once glowing eyes were black voids, dripping with darkness. Dawson roared, shoving it back and unloading 3 shots into its chest. The creature barely reacted. Rains didn't hesitate. She fired a burst straight into its skull. The corrupted Kelzer shrieked, not in pain, but in rage. Black tendrils burst from its wound, writhing and reaching for them. "Fall back," she shouted. They ran, boots pounding against the metal floor. The walls continued to warp, the darkness growing stronger. "The ship is compromised," Voss panted. "This isn't just an infection, it's an entity." Rains knew exactly what he meant. The Forsaken light was reacting violently, sending sharp pulses through her mind, like a warning. This thing, whatever it was an ancient enemy. And it was awake. The heart of corruption. They reached a central command node, its control panels flickering wildly. Rains slashed a hand across the interface, overriding Kelzer security with the knowledge the light had given her. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the ship's interior. It was worse than she feared. A massive black mass pulsed at the core of the ship, tendrils of darkness creeping through every corridor. Kelzer warriors lay scattered and lifeless, some half consumed, others still moving, but no longer themselves. "The ship is lost," Voss murmured, horrified. This is voidborn corruption." Rains didn't recognize the name, but the light did. Images flooded her mind. Entire civilizations consumed by an ancient force, worlds drowned in shadow, empires erased. The Kelzer thought they were the true conquerors of the galaxy, but they had opened a door to something far worse. Dawson reloaded his rifle, grimacing. "So, what's the plan? Because I'm guessing just walking out of here isn't an option." Rains took a deep breath. "We don't leave." She gestured to the control panel. "We crash the damned ship into the nearest Kelzer fleet." Dawson blinked. "That's insane." "Yeah," Rains said, "but it'll make one hell of a statement." The Kelzer battleship trembled beneath them, its hull groaning as the voidborn corruption spread like a disease. The ship's systems flickered erratically, caught in a battle between the alien infestation and the ancient power of the Forsaken light. Captain Alina Rains gripped the command console, overriding the ship's navigational locks. "We're sending this thing straight into the Kelzer fleet," she said, voice steel. Dr. Elias Voss wiped sweat from his brow. "If we do this, there's no turning back." There was never a way back, Sergeant Dawson muttered, locking and loading his rifle. "We either die fighting or watch the galaxy fall." Rains exhaled sharply and punched in the coordinates. The corrupted battleship's engines roared to life, setting course for the heart of the Kelzer Armada. Alarms blared. The ship's defense systems finally recognized them as intruders, triggering security drones and reanimated Voidborn Kal-Zur warriors. They were coming. Hold the bridge. Rains barked. The last battle. The doors burst open, and a wave of twisted Kal-Zur abominations poured in. Half organic, half void, their bodies twisted by the corruption. Dawson opened fire first, his rifle barking as plasma bolts tore through the creatures. Rains followed, dropping two with precise headshots. But they kept coming. The Forsaken light burned inside her, reacting to the dark presence. It whispered to her, showing her how to fight, how to survive. She didn't question it. Rains moved faster than she ever had, dodging claws, countering with brutal efficiency. At some point, her weapon overheated, so she grabbed a fallen Kal-Zur void blade, its black metal pulsing in her grip, and carved through her enemies. Voss screamed as a creature lunged at him, only for Dawson to tackle it, jamming his knife into its skull. The tide wouldn't stop. Then, a breakthrough. Rains slammed the final override, locking the ship's trajectory. The Kal-Zur fleet loomed ahead, their commanders blissfully unaware of what was coming. "We're locked in," she gasped. "Time to go." Dawson hurled a grenade into the enemy ranks, buying them precious seconds. The three of them sprinted for the nearest escape pod, sealing the door just as the final wave of creatures crashed against the bulkhead. Rains punched the release. The pod exploded away from the battleship, tumbling into space. And then, the Kal-Zur Armada finally saw it. Too late. The corrupted battleship slammed into their flagship, the impact tearing through its core. A second later, the Voidborn corruption detonated outward, spreading like wildfire through the fleet, consuming ship after ship. The mighty Kal-Zur Armada, the unstoppable conquerors, were burning. A new dawn. The escape pod drifted through the wreckage, silent but alive. Dawson let out a ragged laugh. Well, that was something. Voss just stared in stunned silence. The Forsaken light knew. It guided us. It used us. Rains, exhausted, watched the dying Kal-Zur fleet. "The war isn't over," she said, "but this was our message." She clenched her fists, the Forsaken light still humming in her blood. Humanity was no longer prey. They were the last hope for peace, and the galaxy was finally paying attention.